Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Martian Life. Hidden organisms found in the Arctic could be similar to life in space. Microbes discovered near the North Pole in Canada, buried in the surface sediment near a place called Lost Hammer Spring, could just provide a blueprint for life forms on Mars. Life forms that could still exist today. This is because the permafrost in Canada's high Arctic is extremely salty, cold, and mostly free of oxygen. It's pretty much the same environment that can be found on Mars. And so, researchers with McGill University took a look at never-before-seen microbes in an attempt to understand alien life. By using the newest and most advanced genomic techniques, researchers demonstrated for the very first time in history that microbes living in an environment just like what we find on Mars can survive. These microbes are tiny, yet flourish by eating and breathing nothing except simple inorganic compounds, the same inorganic compounds that are found on Mars, for example, sulfate, sulfide, and even methane. This discovery near the North Pole is so exciting that samples of the sediments are now being used by the European Space Agency to test the instruments they'll use on their next Mars mission to detect possible life. Basically, proof of alien life has been found just under the North Pole, or at least the feasibility of such a thing. It's given scientists quite a lot of confidence that buried in the Martian soil, there will indeed be life forms. What do you think? Are you ready? Number 9. Sponge gardens. Scientists recently discovered a surprisingly vibrant ecosystem growing in the Arctic Ocean near the North Pole. This rich and densely populated ecosystem consists of massive sponge gardens discovered near the peaks of long-extinct volcanoes. According to researchers on the vessel Polarstern, the life found here is some of the most basic on the planet and can be found everywhere from shallow tropical reefs to apparently the North Pole. Researchers discovered these fascinating animals by lowering a camera underneath the ice and then taking pictures of what's hiding on the bottom of the Arctic Sea. The pictures revealed sponge gardens, and they even managed to collect some samples. What they found truly shocking after analyzing the samples is that many of these living sponges are 300 years old or more. Scientists were surprised to find such an abundance of life because the environment isn't exactly what you would expect to produce such large life forms. Very little light penetrates the surface of the Arctic ice. There's almost no food, and scientists couldn't even figure out what the sponges were eating. It wasn't until they analyzed the samples that they realized the sea sponges act as microbial symbionts, meaning they feast on old organic matter. In simpler terms, they feed on the remains of animals that died thousands of years ago. These things are like fossil eaters, surviving by munching on the slowly decaying remains of creatures that went extinct thousands of years ago. Number 8. Record-breaking dive. In the year 1958, a United States submarine became the very first vessel to ever reach the North Pole by traveling underneath the ice of the Arctic. It was on August 3rd, and the submarine also happened to be the very first nuclear submarine ever made. The commander of the USS Nautilus, William Anderson, wrote in his logbook, "Embarked following personage at North Pole, Santa Claus, affiliation, Christmas." While that seems pretty vague, the commander was just celebrating the occasion in a cryptic log in his book. Because, believe it or not, the first under-ice mission to the North Pole had been top secret, a covert op codenamed Operation Sunshine. Yes, it was a big deal for the world of science. But in the 1950s, it was a bigger deal for American pride considering the Cold War. Even President Dwight Eisenhower called it a magnificent achievement and sent his congratulations to the team. Unfortunately, they didn't find any monsters or strange life forms hiding in the North Pole. Instead, they proved the capabilities of nuclear-powered vehicles, because prior to the USS Nautilus, submarines had to surface or extend a snorkel above the water to take air into their engines and to charge their batteries for propulsion. But since they were running off a nuclear reactor, they never needed to go to the surface at all. By the time they reached the North Pole, they had already been underwater for 3 days. They didn't resurface again until they reached Greenland on August 7th. Number 7. Land of the Gods. Cultures across the world have long believed the North Pole is a place of great magic. Many cultures also believe their ancestors came from the North Pole, and that they had to begin migrating southward because of a great ice deluge 10,000 years ago. In the year 8000 BC, the original inhabitants of the North Pole supposedly traveled into Europe and Asia, built new settlements, and became the people of the world. In fact, there are at least half a dozen mythologies throughout the world that place their most sacred lands at the North Pole. Take the Vikings, for example. In Norse mythology, the land of immortality is at the North Pole. The Celtic myths describe heaven as being a place where the sun shines for 6 months continuously, which sounds quite a bit like the Arctic. The Greeks even called the North Pole Hyperborea, meaning above the north wind, and said it was a place where the sun shined 24 hours a day. Number 6. The Italia airship. The Italia was an airship that belonged to the Italian Air Force. Back in the 1920s, airships were all the rage. Since it was such a nightmare to get across places like the Arctic using a boat, scientists figured it would be easier to visit the North Pole in a giant balloon. This semi-rigid airship was designed and piloted by the Italian engineer Umberto Nobile. The expedition began on April 15, 1928. The airship left Milan with 20 people on board and 17,000 pounds of equipment. It took 30 hours to reach Germany, and after a brief rest, they continued on to Norway, then to the North Pole, where they crashed into a sheet of ice. One man died immediately, one died from exposure while waiting for rescue, and 6 crew members went missing because they got trapped in the envelope of the balloon as it floated away, never to be seen again. By the time the rescue operation was said and done in July of the same year, 17 people, including many of the rescuers, were left dead. The Italia was a huge disaster, and the remains of the airship are still missing somewhere in the Arctic. Number 5. Arctic lightning. Lightning storms in the Arctic are not exactly common. In fact, one of the last things scientists expect to see in the North Pole are bolts of lightning coming out of the sky. This is because lightning is a phenomenon that occurs in warm weather. On a steamy summer in Kansas, you can expect some major lightning. But in the frigid wasteland of the Arctic, that just doesn't happen. At least it never used to. For almost 2 decades, every lightning strike that happens has been monitored in real time by a special organization called the Worldwide Lightning Location Network. These scientists use a global grid of sensors to gather information on lightning strikes, things like frequency and distribution. The data collected over the past approximately 17 years shows a shocking increase in lightning around the North Pole. Actually, it shows dramatic changes everywhere in the Arctic region above 65 degrees north. According to Robert Halsworth, lead director of the WWLLN, lightning strikes have tripled in the Arctic from between 2010 and 2022. And yes, the lightning was actually detected very close to the North Pole, but only in 2019. It was an incredibly rare occurrence, and one we might see more of as climates continue to shift and the Arctic continues to get warmer. Number 4. Canadian monster. A graduate student from the University of Manitoba recently discovered the very first genuine and scientifically real monster underneath Canada's Arctic sea ice. Near the North Pole, a beast was found with 8 bristly legs, a translucent body, 1 eye, 2 antennas, and no mouth. If that sounds terrifying, that's because it is. The only good news is that the monster is only 2 millimeters long. If you want to get a good look at this thing, you're going to need a microscope. Aurélie de la Forge didn't go seeking this monster out on purpose. She found it as more of an accident while searching for biodiversity way up in the Arctic. It's actually a type of copepod, a simplistic organism from the Monstreloida family. There are over 160 different types of Monstreloida found in the world's oceans, but this is the only one that lives in Canada's Arctic. De la Forge was studying the taxonomy of small ocean animals for her master's degree, and so she was already familiar with tiny marine creatures. When she was living at an ice camp not far from the North Pole, she was sampling the ocean as part of her thesis regarding plankton blooms under ice. And that was when she discovered the creature. It was a lucky chance, and shows just how much life there really is crawling across just about every surface of the planet. Number 3. Strange blue lights. In 2019, some extremely strange blue lights were seen hovering above the Arctic Circle, not far from the North Pole. The mysterious blue lights, if NASA is to be believed, had nothing to do with aliens. Still, the lights definitely looked like some kind of bizarre alien phenomenon. It was photographers trying to catch a glimpse of the northern lights that took pictures of the blue, hazy orbs in the sky. About 15 or more of them were found in 2 clear spots in the otherwise empty atmosphere. Chad Blakely, the photographer who captured the amazing images, says he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He literally called it completely out of this world. While these may have looked like the bright blue discharge of some alien vessel, NASA says it actually had to do with a scientific experiment. The Andøya Space Center in Norway launched a pair of rockets that released metallic powder. The powder was released inside the northern lights as part of a way for scientists to investigate the conditions inside the aurora borealis. The metallic powder created a shocking light show, but it also helped researchers to track charged particles in the ionosphere. It's all for scientists to learn as much as they can about the processes which occur at the polar cusp of the Earth, where our magnetic field lines bend to spread across the atmosphere, and where space particles and solar wind meet. Number 2. The most northern island. Scientists have just discovered the closest piece of land to the North Pole. It's the world's northernmost island, and it was revealed just recently thanks to some shifting pack ice. The discovery came, as so many do, completely by accident. Morten Rasch, head of the Arctic Station Research Facility in Greenland, said he and his team had gone to Udak Island to collect science samples. But after they arrived on the island, which was discovered by the Danish back in 1978, they realized they were at the wrong place. They missed their mark by about 3,000 feet. Of course, the island is incredibly small. It's only about 90 feet across and rises to a height of no more than 9 feet from the surface to the ocean. Still, it is technically the northernmost landmass in the world, which meant those explorers were standing as close as a person could stand on solid land to the North Pole. There could be more islands hidden underneath the Arctic ice, specifically the ice found just above Greenland. They have some of the thickest ice in the world, around 9 feet in the summer. And seeing as how the Danish government is trying to make a territorial claim of the North Pole, they're going to need all the islands they can get. Number 1. The C-47 crash. In 2005, a team with the Canadian Forces carried out a sovereignty patrol near the North Pole, way up in the remote Canadian Arctic. They operated out of an abandoned weather station by the name of Isaacson, which can be found on Elif Ringnes Island. It was once part of the network of remote Arctic weather stations called JAWS, or Joint Arctic Weather Stations. It was built just after World War II and operated briefly by the United States and Canada. This area has some of the worst weather on the planet, or at least some of the coldest. The team's patrol included an exercise and emergency response simulating an Arctic crash. What makes this so interesting is that they used the wreckage of a U.S. Air Force C-47 as part of their exercise. The wreckage is that of a plane that crashed here in 1949. Over 50 years later, the plane hadn't moved an inch and was still sitting in the middle of the snow, just miles from the North Pole. From what we know, the C-47 was equipped with skis so it could land in the snow, and had originally touched down at the weather station to resupply. But overnight, frost had majorly accumulated on the aircraft. The crew, who weren't used to such harsh conditions, cleared the windshield but didn't clean the ice off the wings or the stabilizer. They then tried to depart using an airstrip only 4,200 feet long, while covered with about 5 inches of snow. Plus, they were reportedly 850 pounds overweight for a total of 28,850 pounds. The plane went airborne, the right wing dipped, and then they crashed into a riverbank. The C-47 got stuck, but luckily the crew escaped. The vehicle was just abandoned, and nobody ever went back for it. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!